Have you ever felt like everyone else got a roadmap to life and somehow yours got lost in the mail? I know what it's like to not know where you're going. I personally wing things in life that should not be winged, but that's my nature. That's how I travel along my path. And we are all following a unique path to us, and none of it came with instructions.
No.
So hi everybody, I'm Donna with Wild Moon Healers. I help people navigate their healing path by helping them to find their rhythm. And that'll make more sense as I go along. I'm the bridge. Wild Moon Healers is the bridge between spirituality and mental health. And mental health is very important to me. And that's pretty much where my company came from, was on my healing journey. And to combine all this spirituality with lunar wisdom, because the moon is such a great teacher, and she actually gives us a map to healing. And I really wish I had a map, especially for the hard times. Last year, I lost my dad, one of those life paths, you see it coming, but when it hits, it kind of rocks your world. But to be human, we have so many things going on at the same time. So I not only lost my dad, but I was navigating a bunch of health problems. And in my business, I leveled up on my philosophy. My writing is so much better, and all these things. My physical body's down over 100 pounds. So
you
all
were
these
saying, yes.
Yeah.
It was hard to believe. Yeah.
And everybody always has so many things going on. So, but we're not meant to carry everything, right? When we have too much on us, that's when everything becomes a little disorienting. And that's when we wish we had a map, because we're all navigating things and we know what we're dealing with, but dealing with it becomes a trap. Right? So we have our sense of self, but then all these things happen in life. And then we find ourselves trying to manage or balance all these things instead of getting back to ourself, who we are. And, a lot of people think balance is calm. We need balance, so that's how I will fix my life, is when I have balance. But balance isn't calm. We're managing the buckets, we're juggling the balls, we're spinning the plates all at the same time, and balancing takes effort. It takes focus. And when you're balancing, you can feel stuck because you're not moving. You're managing everything that you're balancing. So, you can forget the map there, because if you move in any direction, something's going to fall, right? Everything's going to come down and come to pieces. So, in looking at the moon, she actually teaches us how to flow in through each of our phases by learning about her phases. So the Wild Moon Healing Lunar Year takes the normal monthly lunar cycle and shows you how it goes around a whole year. It really mimics nature. It is nature, right? And it really shows us how to flow through the seasons, through the phases that we're in. The spring equinox is like the lunar new year. If you make New Year's resolutions, that's the time to make it, because in January there's no energy to support big change. But the spring equinox, that's equal to new moon energy. And then spring flows into summer, and then we have the summer solstice, and that's equal to first quarter moon energy. And then we have the collective full moon under the autumn equinox. And then we flow into winter with the winter solstice, which is equal to that last quarter moon energy. And so that the map, it shows us how to flow just with everything in nature, but we don't flow typically.
No, we don't.
And so that is the map, really. You just have to figure out what phase you are in. So it doesn't matter what the moon is doing. It doesn't matter what's happening right outside in nature. We have our own cycles. And when we know what we are dealing with, then we know what kind of care to give ourselves. Many people think new moon energy, this is exciting, right? It's a blank slate. You can create a whole new life And that's true. You can begin again anytime and as many times as you need to. But with new moon energy, excitement and fear can feel the same. And when you look at the first two lunations of a lunar year, starts with Aries, Taurus, those moon cycles are meant to wake us up after winter. And it shows us, it's time to grow. And nature outside shows us how beautiful that can be. But growth can be uncomfortable. So in the waxing phase, which is around summertime, that's about learning, growing, and building. But what we don't talk about much is how all of that learning and growing can trigger us. Because we're not just learning how to build something in our lives, we're learning about us and how we deal with things when we're triggered and such. And then full moons are all about shadow work. And a lot of people are afraid of shadow work because they think it's looking at everything that really, really hurts us. But shadow work can be very practical. I used the example of me 2 full moons ago, Sagittarius full moon. I was cleaning out my closet under that energy with the specific intention of everything in my house matching who I am now versus who I was before. And then waning energy teaches us about release and stillness, the pause, which is so important because that's how we integrate everything that we've learned and things in our life. But the concept of letting go was one of the hardest for me to conceptualize because early on in my healing journey, things like depression, things were running my life, and I'm like, I don't want it, take it. I didn't realize about that going through to get on the other side. So that whole concept of release was just very foreign to me for a while. So I want to paint a picture for you all. I'm going to do a visualization. So if you feel safe, you can go ahead and close your eyes or just kind of gaze down at the floor. And we're going to begin with a deep inhale. Feel your body expand. Release the breath. Just do a couple more breaths. Get your energy calmed down. Just notice that you are breathing. Notice the air flowing in and flowing out. Imagine you're walking outside on a cold winter day, and as you walk, there's crisp air sharp against your face. You're dressed for the weather. You have on a jacket, a scarf, boots, gloves, a hat pulled down over your ears. And at first, it feels very manageable being outside. Snow starts falling lightly. It's large flakes. It's beautiful. The path in front of you is clear. You know exactly where you're going. Once you take one step, you get momentum and you take another and another. And as you continue walking, the snowfall begins to pick up. The flakes become thicker, heavier. The snow starts to collect on the grass and stick to the sidewalk. And your boots start sinking slightly into the ground beneath you, crunching as they pack the snow. The path is still there, but it takes a little more effort to stay on it. You keep moving because that's what you've always done. You push through, you tell yourself you're fine. It's only a little bit of snow, we can keep going. So you pull your coat tighter, and you keep moving, but the storm keeps coming as well. The snow begins collecting faster than you can walk through it. It reaches your ankles, then your calves. It keeps piling up. Each step requires more energy. Your legs begin to feel heavy. Your breathing becomes labored. The cold finds its way through the layers that once kept you comfortable. You can no longer see as far ahead as you could before. The path is harder to recognize. Every step feels like effort. Every step is no longer about living, it's about survival. And eventually the snow becomes too deep. And you stop, not because you want to, not because you're lazy, not because you failed. You stop because the conditions have changed. The storm has become bigger than your ability to navigate it the way you once could. You can't move forward, you can't move backward. Eventually the snow becomes too deep. And you stop, not because you want to, not because you're lazy, not because you failed. You stop because the conditions have changed. The storm has become bigger than your ability to navigate it the way you once could. You can't move forward, you can't move backward. You're just standing in the middle of a storm wondering, what happened? How could something that once felt so natural and easy now feel impossible? And as your steps fall out of sync, you eventually lose your internal rhythm. You know, this is what burnout feels like. Overwhelm, emotional exhaustion. It's not weakness, it's not failure, it's not a lack of motivation. It's just simply a human being trying to navigate conditions that have changed. This is what happens when life keeps asking us to carry more than we have the capacity to hold. With nervous system regulation, you're taught words like fawn, freeze, fight, flight, but instead of self-diagnose what you're doing, that way I like to show people what we're actually doing. We don't get stuck because we're broken. We get stuck because we stop listening to ourselves. We don't create space, and we keep stacking good on top of what is unresolved, thinking that one thing will help fix our life. You know, we keep all the old patterns, all the old stories, all the old habits, and we move forward with everything just thinking, well, if I do this one good, healthy thing, it will fix it. But healing doesn't work like that. When we feel stuck, the body doesn't need more effort. It needs a better map. To begin with, we need three things. We need awareness, space, and rhythm. Space is inside and outside. We have to declutter. We have to clean up what's been built out. You know, you can't just keep piling good on top of bad and counterbalance it. Healing requires room. Becoming who you're meant to be requires room. And that's why I cleaned out my closet, right? You know, it doesn't have to be complicated. Rhythm is about movement. So once the snow is cleared, your path is visible again, you begin to regain your footing. You know, you find this cadence, something that is supportive to you and not forced. And this is rhythm, the way you move through life when you're no longer pushing through the storm. Like when I lost my dad last year, grief and depression kind of piled up my path for a little bit. And that's okay, that's part of healing. We're meant to experience all of it. Awareness is also what I call witnessing yourself. We have to learn to see ourselves differently, watch what we do, what we say, what we think. Because as you begin to move again, you start to notice sensations, and the language of the body speaks in emotions and sensations. And we try to think our way through healing, but healing happens in the body. And it begins with awareness. Your energy begins to change because awareness changes everything. Awareness isn't judgment, it's orientation. So once you know where you are, the moon can help teach us to navigate. It gives us the knowledge to deal with what's in our life. So awareness is where everything changes Space creates room for change to even be possible. And once you have rhythm, you have space to move, and rhythm helps you find your footing again. That movement is participation in life. So you start to reconnect to things outside of you without losing yourself. But awareness, that's that moment you look around and you realize that you're standing in the middle of a storm. You know, that's awareness is orientation, but awareness alone isn't enough. Because once you know where you are, more questions start to come, right? Awareness isn't a destination on a map, it's a doorway. So the new questions that start coming up are, do I trust what I'm seeing? Do I trust what my body is telling me? Can I trust myself to do differently? Most of us have no problem becoming aware. You know, we know that we can identify a stress, we can name the pattern, we can recognize this emotion or feeling, but then we immediately start arguing with it. You know, I'm fine, it's okay, it'll wait till tomorrow. So awareness shows us the information we need to create change. Trust allows us to believe it. And then we have boundaries that help us honor it. Without trust, awareness becomes self-criticism. Without boundaries, awareness becomes overwhelming. But when awareness is paired with trust and boundaries, that turns into wisdom. Trust means that you accept the messages from your body and you honor it in that moment. You know, we all want to be seen and be heard, and our bodies want the same thing. So let's recap really quick. We have to remove clutter inside and outside, release whatever noise is around us to create space. Once we have space, we can hear our body's messages. And then rhythm gives you timing. You start participating in life. You start to react to your body's messaging in real time. Because when you have space to hear the messages and you respond accordingly, you begin to move through life with more ease. Awareness gives you information, so you're learning to hold space for yourself. Trust is what happens when you stop arguing with that information. Like, have you ever prayed? I have. Lord, just get me through today. You know, you've got all these things to do, and your body's like, we're not going to make it. It's like, oh, tomorrow, I'll slow down. And that's what I'm talking about here. We know what our body was asking of us, but we're trying to make these deals. We're trying to negotiate with it, or we just ignore it completely. You know, we get too busy. We keep pushing through. But then what happens when we keep pushing through? We might get sick, right? Life has a way of, when we don't stop, it will stop us. You can't protect yourself from awareness, because honest awareness is necessary. It's where healing begins. But you can contain what you become aware of so that it doesn't overwhelm your nervous system. Boundaries aren't walls, they're not fences with gates. Boundaries are containers. They hold, you know, they don't block anything out, but their intention is to hold you. This space right here where you have your boundaries, this is all of you, and this is where the world begins. And you know when your space has been violated, if someone gets a little too close or something, you can feel it. But what we do, maybe back up a little bit. So once you're aware of what you're feeling and you trust yourself enough to move through it, and you have somewhere safe to hold it, now you're in a whole different ballgame. Boundaries are what allow awareness to remain embodied instead of overwhelming us, that's when we go and we want to numb or escape our life. You know, we're humans. We do avoid discomfort. We stay passive. You know, we refuse accountability and expect change without participation. But these are patterns to become aware of, not ways to judge ourselves. You know, it's not laziness, it's not criticism, it's patterns, information, awareness. And the space between action and becoming aware and taking action in the world, this space is on your map. This space tells you when and how to move, because this is where your body's talking to you, right? So once you are aware of whatever's happening around you and you trust yourself enough to move forward differently, and you have this rhythm that feels comfortable to you and space to hold it, then it's time to reflect. That's that pause, that stillness where integration happens. You know, taking a break isn't inaction or laziness, it's a choice. And when you pause, that's the somatics of healing, by listening to your body, the sensations, the emotions, these feelings. You know, once you become still, you might notice that tightness in your jaw, that clenching, the tightness in your chest, or you might notice your body getting warmer, your heartbeat speeding up. This is your body talking to you. You know, awareness will tell you something's happening here. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Something is happening. Trust lets you sit with it rather than pushing through it. And then boundaries let you respond without carrying what isn't yours into life. You know, but very rarely do we take one step in life and then pause to think about it or integrate. Even right now, it feels a little uncomfortable, right? It's weird to us to do that. It doesn't feel natural, but that's what our body asks of us. So when we slow down and when we can integrate and think about, reflect on what we've become aware of, that's when you start to notice things that this isn't even mine. I can set this down. You know, this was created for me 2 years ago. I needed this to help me get through a situation. Why am I still carrying that? You know, I can set this down. So boundaries let us separate the next step from the overload. When we skip the space between, we go straight from noticing to doing something, right? We feel something, we gotta fix it. We become aware of something, we start doing self-improvement. And the more you skip this space of who you are, the sense of self starts to diminish. Every time you skip it and just start doing something, until the point where you feel like life itself is just squeezing you. That's what overwhelm feels like, you know, when the rooms are closing in on you. So in order to reverse engineer it, we go back to the beginning, right? We have this awareness, now we need space, we need rhythm to start creating space for us to exist again. So healing without a map doesn't mean we're wandering aimlessly, it means we're learning to trust our internal signals and respect our body's limits at the same time. So space creates possibility. Rhythm creates movement or participation in life. Awareness creates clarity. Trust and boundaries are how we stay present in our present storm without losing our way. So healing isn't about fixing ourselves because we're not broken. It's about recognizing what phase you're in and then responding with the right kind of care. So let's look at each phase of the moon and see what kind of care that might be. What might it look like to be in each phase? If you're in a new moon phase, you may need permission to pause, to slow down and get quiet. We may be demanding answers before they're ready to come. And if you've ever asked for patience, you may be in a season of becoming. So if you feel hurried in life, it may be teaching us how to trust what we cannot yet see. So if you need a pause, that could be something as easy as taking a nap, saying no to any more commitments, or spending time in nature, or just admitting to yourself, I don't know what comes next. If you're in a waxing moon phase, you may need support to take the next step. If you've ever asked for support or ever needed to, you may be in a season of building. Life might be teaching you that healing was never meant to be done alone. And it might look like asking for help. It might look like accepting encouragement or practicing some new skill. My favorite is taking a small step before you're ready, and you're allowed to scream when you do that. If you're in a full moon phase, you may need the courage to face what's being revealed to you. That can be a truth, a pattern, some sort of feeling that you're like discovering for the first time. What is my body telling me right now? So if you've ever asked for courage, you may be in a season of seeing. Life might be showing you what can no longer stay hidden. And facing something might look like having a difficult conversation, setting a boundary with someone, or just being honest about what you're feeling without bracing for someone's reaction. And if you're in a waning moon phase, you may need grace as you are releasing what no longer serves you to make space for what's coming. If you've ever asked for a break, just give me a break. You might be in a season of release. We think things are piling up so much, and it's because they are. We haven't learned to set anything down. So life might be teaching you how to let go without losing yourself. And release might look like grieving or forgiving, decluttering your home, or just taking some time to rest. All the moon's phases are simply different forms of healing. We stop forcing movement for the sake of progress, and we start honoring our rhythm. So maybe life was never about finding a map. Maybe healing is about learning to trust yourself when the map or your path disappears. So, we've all had dreams, ambitions, things that didn't quite work out. And when that happens, we lose a little bit of trust in ourselves. When things don't go our way, that's when we start to feel lost, disconnected. And all of that is just information to become aware of. So raise your hand. Have you ever stayed with something longer than you should have? A job, a relationship, some dream, some version of yourselves. We can recognize it in the moment, but change can be hard. And that awareness, just knowing that, okay, something isn't right here, that's where change happens, so long as you stop arguing with the information. So right now, for a moment, just think about, what are you carrying? And what would happen if you set it down? So I'll do a quick recap. Space allows you to hear yourself. Rhythm is how you move yourself. Awareness is how you see yourself. Trust allows you to believe yourself. And boundaries are how we honor ourselves. Any questions?